Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today we need to take a look at the best trainers deck in Pokemon right now. And look, we've had 10 trainers decks. We had all 4 of the ones that came around in Battle Partners. You can see them on the booster pack here. They are, of course, N, Hop, Lily, and Ino. We've then just had Hot Air Arena, and Hot Air Arena brought us 4 new trainers. We've got Arven, Cynthia, and Ethan, who you can see on the front of the pack there. And then also Misty, who for some reason doesn't make the front of the pack. And then let's not forget we've got our Marnie and Steven decks that have also been released over in Japan. And that makes us up to a nice even 10 trainers. So which one is actually winning? Well, weirdly enough, if we look at the metagame over in Japan right now, it is almost, not quite, but almost Ethan's Typhlosion. Ethan's Typhlosion is almost the best of the trainers Pokemon rolling around right now, but in actual fact, it's Cynthia's Garchomp. By the way, by looking at this little tier list here, shout out to PokeCardBook for making this, or at least sharing it, it looks like Lily's Clefairy is the best trainers deck. That's not actually true. And feel free to have this argument with me in the comment section. But essentially, it's not really a Lily's Clefairy deck. It is that box deck we see with Teal Mask Ogabon, Wellspring Mask Ogabon, and Pikachu EX. And it plays one Lily's Clefairy. It's often called a Lily's Clefairy deck. And Lily's Clefairy works there as a utility attacker. The ability means that Dragon Pokemon are weak to Fairy, so it's a great counter to Dragapult, which is the absolute hands-down best deck in the format right now. Remember, it's the only S-tier deck on the tier list I showed you, so look, it's great. What I'm saying is, I'm not calling that really a Lily's Clefairy deck. That is a box deck that has Lily's Clefairy in. And for what it's worth, we also see it as like a one-off often in Gardevoir decks. But no, the best actual trainers deck right now, it's almost Ethan's Typhlosion. It's actually Cynthia's Garchomp. How cool is that? I'm a little bit excited about this. I like me some Garchomp. Question is, how does it work? And do we think it could be great? Well, one of the things we need to note straight off the bat, people can't quite decide how to play Cynthia's Garchomp, but there are a few things we have in common. Like, for instance, this one might shock you, Cynthia's Garchomp. And Cynthia's Garchomp works very, very nicely for the consistency. Because firstly, we got Cynthia's Garchomp, that's lovely, but we can't look at that before we look at Cynthia's Gabite. And Cynthia's Gabite here is absolutely redonkulous. Because what it does, it's got an ability whereby once during your turn, you may search your deck for a Cynthia's Pokemon, show your opponent, add it to your hand, shuffle your deck. But the thing is, this is actually way better than you might think. Because of course, let's say you get all of your Gibble out turn 1. Well, you only need to get 1 Gabite on turn 2. Because Gabite number 1 will search Gabite number 2, Gabite number 2 will search Gabite number 3, and Gabite number 3 will search Gabite number 4. So if you get 4 Gibble down turn 1, and you can get yourself a single Gabite turn 2, you will get all 4 Gabite, and then of course on turn 3, each of those 4 Gabite will search for a Garchomp, and you've got 4 Garchomp up and ready to go. Bearing in mind Garchomp's got 330 HP and free retreat, so switching between them should be rather easy. Then of course you've got the attack, single energy, 100 damage, draw until you've got 6 cards in your hand. This is basically where you're using this to take a KO. And if you're taking a KO anyway, why not use this to grab a bunch of extra cards? Otherwise, what you can basically do here is use a second attack, which is 2 energy, 260. Except it's not really 260. because this is where Roserade comes in. Roserade, incidentally, a good argument for why you might not have 4 Garchomp down. Because what Roserade does is it's got an ability whereby if this Pokemon is in play, your Cynthia's Pokemon do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So it's not 260 with Garchomp, it's 290 if you've got 1 Roserade, 320 if you've got 2, which will KO almost anything, and 350 if you've got 3, which will actually KO anything. Wonderful. And that's largely the deck here. Smash with Garchomp, set up with Gabite, and then use Roserade to roll. But there is one other Pokemon which is pretty essential in this deck, and it is Cynthia's Spiritomb. Because for a single energy, you do 10 damage for each damage counter on each of your Cynthia's Pokemon. Or each of your bent Cynthia's Pokemon, I should say. Doesn't count damage on the active. And that's a basic Pokemon for a single colorless energy that means your opponent doesn't want to leave any damage on the board. Yeah, that'll work really rather nicely. So what else do we go with this deck? Well, there's a few other options in terms of Pokemon. Pheasantipity to draw is always a good shout. And yes, we will generally see 1 copy of Pheasantipity in here. That's pretty standard for the vast majority of decks, honestly. You had a Pokemon code last turn? Draw 3 cards. Job's a good 'un. Similarly, Badoo that we see in a lot of decks to essentially slow the game down and stop your opponent playing items for a little while. It's not in every deck card, but it's one that we do see coming up fairly often. Also, things like the new Shaman to give your benched non-rule box Pokemon protection. So it's not actually going to work to protect your Garchomp, but it will protect basically everything else, so that's kind of a win. But largely, there's a few other support Pokemon we can use for haggling, but generally speaking, yeah, it's Garchomp, it's Roserade, and it's Spiritomb. Now, the ace spec here gets very, very confusing because people can't decide what the ace spec should be. I have seen a bunch of different ace specs seeing play over in Japan in this particular deck. For instance, Precious Trolley sounds like a pretty good option, and it is a pretty good option. Gets all of your basics out, and like I say, if you get all your basics turn 1, then all you need to do is get 1 Gabite on turn 2, and then you're off and rolling, you've got everything that is good. But then I've also seen a bunch with Prime Catcher, and Prime Catcher doesn't really take much introduction at this point. It's gusting on an item card. It's phenomenal. Sees a ridiculous amount of play. But I've also seen both Scoop Up Cyclone and Hero's Cape to essentially give you a bit more survivability, allow you to heal up your Garchomp or give a bit of extra HP or whatever, although bearing in mind we do have Cynthia's Power Weights, which will give you an extra 70 HP, so I'm not a huge fan of the Cape here for that reason, but I've seen some builds playing it. I've also, I'm going to show you one of these in a minute, I've also seen a build I really like with Neo Upper Energy. Because of course Garchomp is a 2 energy attacker, and it is a stage 2, so Neo Upper Energy will pay it in one go if you need it to. It's not a card we see very much at all nowadays, but it does actually work. And this is a deck with a 2 energy attack that doesn't really have much energy acceleration, so I can see it, ladies and gentlemen. I can see it. Now, in terms of other cards, a copy of TM Evolution generally is a very good option here. If you go second, you get your Gibble on turn 1, you evolve into a couple of Gabite at the end of turn 1, and then on turn 2, you can use those Gabite to search out Cynthia's Pokemon, including at least 1 Garchomp, and then you are off and rolling. I do like that very much indeed. Now, here's a fun little list. I like this list. This one's very different. We can see we got 3 Colress's Tenacity here that lets you search out Special Energy. And then we've got that Neo Upper Energy, the one I showed you a moment ago. But then we've also got Reversal Energy here, which, if you've got more prize cards remaining than your opponent, and attached to an evolution Pokemon that doesn't have a rule box, it provides free energy at a time. And you can essentially combine that with Luxray. This is a bit of a more gimmicky build, but I do kind of like it. In a more straightforward build, we're looking at something like this. Now, this is a Heroes Cape variant, which I'm not a huge fan of in terms of the ace spec, but the rest of it is pretty much what we would expect. We do see there are a couple of rare candy. We don't have to play rare candy in this deck, but it's nice to have that potential to drop it out of nowhere. We haven't fixed on the best Garchomp list right now. I think that's fair to say. But I'm telling you, this is a deck with a huge amount of potential. It's one that I like very much indeed. And right now, it is the best straight trainers deck we've got. Yes, I know Lily's Clefairy is doing better in other decks, but it's not really a Lily's Clefairy deck now, is it? So there we go. That's what you need to know. And now it's over to you guys. Do you think Cynthia's Garchomp is legit and here to stay? Do you think there is a better trainers Pokemon deck out there? Let me know in the comment section. Good us. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWasi. That's where we talk about Pokemon and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, join a Discord, and all kinds of fun things. And get shoutouts on the channel like the lovely Andrew Kincaid, who's been a supporter of ours for a long time, is often seen at events, just helping out, being lovely, doing Play Lab, and being frankly a lovely person. So shout out to them for the support and the loveliness. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.